Hey everyone! Welcome to our channel, where truth meets entertainment. If you love celebrity stories, untold secrets, and jaw-dropping twists, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. Joyce Meyer has revealed something shocking about Joni Lamb that you won't believe. Joyce unleashes a truth bomb that leaves Joni stunned and jaw-reeling in a startling turn of events that is rocking the Christian world. Betrayal, unspoken secrets, and a shocking discovery that alters your entire perception of Jar's flawless appearance. Does Joni Lamb's story stop here? Keep an eye out, since this is only the start. For many years, Joni Lamb was seen as a devoted, cheerful leader who graciously led Daystar and gave millions of viewers words of hope. She was seen on stage thanking God and urging families to remain resilient. And a lot of people thought she was just who she seemed. However, behind the lights, with smiles from the camera, things were evolving in ways that were invisible on screen. Within Daystar's offices, rumors began to spread. Employees observed Joni's growing dominance as she insisted on making all decisions, no matter how minor, without seeking input. Once family-like co-workers now felt uneasy around her and were reluctant to voice their opinions or provide ideas. According to some, if you disagreed with Joni, you would be subtly promoted to a new position or fired completely. Although the transformation was gradual, it was obvious that something was changing. Things were also becoming tight at home. Jonathan, her son, who used to stand proudly next to her, started to distance himself. Although he had always supported Daystar's objective, he began to feel more like an employee than a everyone cherished member of the family. They began to quarrel more frequently, and Jonathan started to avoid public appearances, leading others to speculate about his whereabouts. The mother and son's once warm relationship was growing tense, and friends close to the family observed the stress. At church functions, people started whispering to each other, asking why Joni appeared aloof or irritated. Even while she continued to smile, people who paid close attention could see how forced it occasionally seemed. After hearing accounts of staff members feeling under pressure and meetings being less about God's vision and more about preserving Joni's authority, supporters who had previously viewed her as a compassionate leader began to become perplexed. Rumors began to spread outside of Daystar in the meantime. According to some, Joni was more concerned with establishing her reputation than advancing God's kingdom, and that her ambition was displacing her humility and faith. Others said that instead of concentrating on the network's actual purpose, she was exploiting Daystar to maintain her celebrity. Partners and donors started to worry about whether their money was still being used for a cause they supported. Joni Lamb's appearance as it was becoming more difficult to conceal the fractures in the flawless Christian leader. Inside Daystar, those closest to her were witnessing the pressure, the fights, and the fear of speaking up, while viewers continued to see the well-polished broadcasts and religious lectures. Even Joni saw the rising friction between the intimate reality and the public image. She was aware that people were beginning to take notice, but she was powerless to stop the gradual disintegration that was occurring all around her. Those who had previously trusted Joni's leadership started to wonder if Daystar's mission was still centered on faith or if it had shifted to preserving Joni's reputation as the days went by and her influence became even stronger. No longer were the imperfections in the flawless image only murmurs. They were becoming widely known, and the world was going to discover that the face they saw on television did not tell the whole tale. For many years, Joyce Meyer and Joni Lamb supported one another as leaders in Christian media, stood together on stages, and prayed together in private. They were viewed as a strong team by many, spreading the gospel to millions of people and demonstrating what friendship and religion may look like. However, people were unaware that Joyce had been observing Joni's transformation behind the scenes. And she was quite concerned about what she witnessed. Joyce has a reputation for speaking bluntly and forcefully. She is cautious about when to speak up, though. She decided to remain silent for a while in the hopes that things would work themselves out. She had witnessed Joni grow more. Daystar was domineering, controlling every aspect and shoving aside anyone who dared to challenge her. Joyce observed that the emphasis appeared to change from serving God to preserving Joni's reputation and maintaining her authority. And Joyce was devastated to see it occur. She made an effort to speak with Joni in private. She would give her a late-night call at night in an attempt to get in touch with the friends she used to know and remind her of the original motivation behind their ministry. They were to live in humility before God, aid others, and preach their beliefs. Joyce felt Joni was no longer paying much attention, though, every time she made an attempt. Rather, Joni would shift the subject or say she would give it some thought, but nothing ever altered. She stated that Joni has been working with the order ever since. Joyce, meanwhile, heard from employees of Daystar who dared not speak up. They related tales of meetings where fear took the place of faith, of being kicked out for disagreeing with Joni, and of how Joni's obsession with control was depleting the ministry of its original intent. Quietly, Joyce listened to every narrative, every sob-filled phone call, every cry for assistance. Joyce gradually came to the conclusion that remaining silent was no longer beneficial. She started to sense that God was urging her to tell the truth, even if it meant jeopardizing her connection with Joni and running the danger of criticism from others who wouldn't get it. She prayed about it. For weeks, she prayed to God for bravery and wisdom because she knew that once she spoke, there was no going back. Joyce then came to the conclusion that the time had come. With her Bible in hand and a composed yet firm voice, she stood before a small group and started to reveal what she had been keeping to herself for so long. Joyce claimed to have seen Joni stray from the cause that both of them supported, transforming Daystar into something that favored Joni's objectives over God's. She described how faith and humility had been supplanted by power and control, and how it was painful to watch a friend lose sight of what was really important. Joyce spoke clearly and with a profound sense of sadness and disappointment rather than rage. Her words, "I have loved Joni like a sister, but when I witness God's work being transformed into a platform for me, I can't remain silent." She clarified that the leadership in she felt Joni had forgotten that God's kingdom is about serving others with humility and love, not about clinging to power. The whole Christian community seemed to take a deep breath when Joyce finally spoke. Some were taken aback, finding it hard to accept that Joyce would criticize Joni. Others were relieved to finally realize how tense they were. Long-lasting sense. Under Joni's guidance, those who had previously felt disregarded or marginalized suddenly felt heard and seen. Joni's followers swiftly defended her, claiming Joyce was misinformed and didn't know the whole truth. They claimed Joyce was making a private argument into a public event. Joyce, however, remained steadfast. This wasn't personal drama, she knew. It was about calling out a friend who was straying from the path and defending the core of ministry. More stories emerged as Joyce's remarks spread. Former workers and those who had collaborated with Daystar described how they believed Joni's leadership had altered the company culture. They discussed how faith was replaced by fear and how choices appeared to be more about preserving Joni's status rather than carrying out God's will. They also have the confidence to speak up because of Joyce's bravery. After speaking up, Joyce felt the consequences of her choice every day. Going against someone she had once referred to as a close friend wasn't easy for her, but she knew it was the correct thing to do. She kept praying for Joni in the hopes that this epiphany would be beneficial. Determine what has to be altered. Not only for Daystar's benefit, but also for Joni's own heart and spiritual connection. Joyce's choice to speak up turned out to be a pivotal moment. It made it possible for the church to have the essential discussions about responsibility, authority, and the real goal of ministry. It served as a reminder that no leader is above criticism and that caring for another person sometimes entails being honest with them, even if it is painful. As Joyce carried on with her ministry, she never wavered in her resolve to defend the mission that Daystar and Joni had once shared, not to destroy any of them. She wished to see Daystar revert to its original mission of promoting hope and faith rather than control and terror. In a moment of confusion, Joyce's voice became a beacon of light, demonstrating what it means to lead with courage and integrity, despite when you suffer severe consequences. Ultimately, Joyce's choice to stand up was motivated by more than just Joni. It was intended to serve as a reminder to the Christian community that even leaders must answer to the calling they profess to serve, that humility must come before power, and that faith must come before renown. Everything would alter in that instant, and the reverberations of Joyce's. For years to come, ministries would be affected by the courageous remarks. It was immediately felt within Daystar's walls when Joyce Meyer broke her quiet. The truth could not be hidden any longer. What had been whispered in corners was now in the open. Even those who made an effort to remain neutral could sense that everything was about to change, and those who had worked there for years began to feel the tension rising. Employees in the Daystar offices were conflicted. As a strong leader who continued the network following Marcus Lamb's death, Joni Lamb had long been admired by several. They recalled how she would inspire them to maintain faith at the heart of all they did, how she would focus throughout lengthy planning sessions, and how she would pray before meetings. However, once Joyce's remarks gained traction, other workers began expressing recall times when something had never felt quite right. The way staff would look at each other but remain mute, the anxiety at meetings when someone questioned Joni's choices, and the way Joni seemed to value power over cooperation. The misunderstanding was the most difficult aspect for many. They adored the Daystar mission. They felt that Christian media had a lot of influence and that faith-based programs might change people's lives. However, they now questioned whether their work was increasingly focused on upholding Joni's reputation rather than helping God's people. Changes were also noticed by the audience. People who had been watching Daystar for years began to send emails inquiring about what was going on and whether the reports were real. A few viewers were upset about Joyce, accusing her of dividing the body of Christ. Others expressed their gratitude to her, stating that they had long suspected something was off but were unsure of how to voice their concerns. Confusion, prayers, and requests for clarification were all mixed together in the social media comments. The ministry partners who had provided Daystar with financial help started to inquire. They were curious as to whether their donations continued to be utilized to advance the gospel or to uphold the authority of a leader. A few ministries made the decision to put their collaborations on hold as they awaited Daystar's response to the accusations. Others, concerned that their own reputations might suffer if they continued to engage with Daystar, discreetly started searching for other networks to collaborate with. There was a lot of stress in the Lamb household. The children of Joni, who had always been involved in the ministry, found themselves in a challenging situation. Some felt that Joyce had misinterpreted the issue and totally supported their mother. Others experienced stress and pondered whether Joyce's remarks were a warning. After working closely with his mother, Jonathan Lamb was torn between loyalty to his family, as well as the mounting worries of the employees and supporters who desired openness. At Daystar, board discussions turned heated. Questions that had never been asked before were posed. People were curious about the decision-making process, the expenditure of funds, and the reasons behind Joni's refusal to directly address some of the issues. A board. While some members advocated for accountability and audits, others supported Joni, claiming that this was a spiritual assault intended to undermine the ministry's influence. Public opinion wasn't the only aspect of the fallout. It had an impact on the daily atmosphere. Employees who had previously felt safe now feared losing their jobs for raising concerns. Volunteers with prior service. Christians began to distance themselves from a ministry that was being criticized. The interns who had traveled to Daystar to study Christian media were caught up in an unfamiliar storm. Joni Lamb made an effort to maintain her position throughout. She issued remarks claiming that the charges were unjust and that Daystar remained dedicated to God's cause. As usual, she preached and prayed when she appeared on broadcasts, exuding confidence. However, viewers took note of the strain in her eyes and the deliberate word choice. Despite her attempts to continue as usual, it was evident that the accusations were weighing heavily on her. Conflicted were among of Daystar's most devoted viewers. They didn't want to think that the woman they had put their trust in for so long could have forgotten the goal. They felt a connection to her trip, had prayed with her throughout broadcasts, and had witnessed her struggle through sadness when Marcus passed away. Joyce's statements seemed like a betrayal to them. But they couldn't deny the questions that were coming up in the back of their minds. The strain only increased as the days stretched into weeks. The story was taken up by media outlets, and what had begun as a problem within the faith community became a matter of discussion in Christian news circles. Church leaders started to express their opinions on what responsibility for Christian leaders should entail, and articles and podcasts were produced to examine the issue. Uncertain of what was actually going on, ministries were discreetly withdrawing from their partnerships with Daystar, and staff were murmuring in the hallways. Although Joni made an effort to continue the broadcasts, displaying her customary self-assured attitude on television, the stress in her voice and the fatigue in her eyes were not concealed by the cameras. She tried to believe that God could resolve this through prayer, but she was unable to mute the uncertainties that continued to haunt her at night. The atmosphere inside the Daystar offices shifted. Once laughing and project planning meetings became heated debates about budgets, dwindling viewership, and the public's mounting skepticism. Some employees continued to fully support Joni because they thought she was being attacked spiritually, that Joni was being misinterpreted and that the statements were unjust. However, others began to wonder if the ministry had gone too far in preserving Joni's reputation rather than concentrating on its primary goal of sharing the gospel. Every glance, every tentative query from her staff, and every email from fans inquiring about the true situation weighed heavily on Joni. She recalled the early days with Marcus, praying together, organizing heartfelt broadcasts, staying up late, and dreaming about using Christian media to impact the world. Even though they didn't have much at the time, they felt a clear mission and had trust. The success they had created now surrounded Joni, but it felt hollow, as if the objective had been overshadowed by the demands of maintaining it all. The tension remained at home. Even though they had always been involved in the ministry, her children were finding it difficult to figure out their own responsibilities in Daystar and the family. Jonathan in particular was torn between feeling obligated to preserve the ministry's integrity for the future and providing for his mother. Talks shifted too. They all struggled to find out how to maintain the ministry and the family without losing themselves in the process, which led to arguments with voices raising and tears streaming down their faces. Joni would pray silently and ask God to reveal her what to do as she strolled through the deserted hallways of the building late at night. To show everyone that she was still the leader God had chosen her to be, she wanted to battle for Daystar, but she could not deny the fact that a change was necessary. The murmurs had become the loud reality. Daystar was unable to proceed as it had in the past. Both the critics and the porters were anticipating Joni's next move. Some demanded that she resign so that new leaders might take over and give Daystar a new direction. Others begged her to remain strong, to demonstrate to the world that she could lead the ministry through the storm and emerge stronger on the other side, and that she would not back down in the face of accusations. Joni was caught between those two voices. A part of her longed for serenity and wondered if letting go was the right thing to do, but another part of her wanted to fight, to prove that she was not the woman being portrayed in reports and rumors. It is an act of faith rather than a sign of failure. She recalled how Marcus would pray before making any decisions and would constantly remind her that their purpose was to share the love of Jesus with others, not to further their own interests. Joni sat at her desk one morning, crying as the sun rose over the silent parking lot. She unfolded her Bible, allowing the pages to unfold to reveal a verse that had already gotten her through a lot of storms. Know that I am God and remain motionless. This time, the words struck her in a different way. They felt more like a call to surrender and trust God, even if it meant taking a step back, than a summons to keep battling in her own strength. For the first time in a long time, Joni started praying honestly, without attempting to sound composed or strong. She acknowledged her pride, her anxiety, her need for control, and her wish to see Daystar return to its mission free from the specters of discord and controversy. Even if it meant relinquishing the position she had occupied for so long, she prayed to God to lead her and show her what needed to change. Some of the most difficult days of her life followed. She had meetings with her key advisors, employees, and kids. Revealing her emotions honestly, acknowledging her shortcomings, and stating her wish to see Daystar recovered and restored to its purpose. While some sat silently and let the impact of her words to sink in, others wept alongside her. It felt like walls were falling down and genuine conversations were taking place for the first time in a long time. Joni made the decision to stand back from day-to-day leadership, giving more authority to a dependable group while she concentrated on seeking God's providing guidance and mending troubled relationships. Although she didn't entirely abandon Daystar, she gave herself permission to recuperate, rest, and concentrate on her religion rather than her appearance. The change was felt by the audience as well. Joni revealed her choice in a public broadcast, expressing her sensitivity rather than using formal language. She also acknowledged the hurt caused by the previous season and asked for forgiveness for her mistakes. She expressed gratitude to the audience for their prayers and support, and she hoped that Daystar would emerge from this season stronger and more determined to serve others and share the gospel. It marked a sea change for Daystar as a whole as well as for Joni. By emphasizing openness, responsibility, and a renewed emphasis on religion above celebrity, the ministry started to regain the trust of its partners and viewers. When employees saw that change was feasible and that the mission was larger than any one individual, they started to feel hopeful again. Joni persisted in praying, healing, and believing that God had not finished with either Daystar or her. Although the season was difficult, it served as a reminder that God's work is always about His kingdom, not about our own. And letting God lead is perhaps the most courageous thing a leader can do. This pivotal moment served as the basis for a fresh phase.